It's one small step for man.
AI rebels face.
Giant leap for mankind.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the AI Rebels podcast. I'm your co-host, Jacob.
And I am your other co-host, Spencer. Today we have with us a repeat guest. We have Nikolai from DeepNewz. Nikolai, how are you going? How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Doing well. We'd love to hear a little bit about how things are going since we last talked. When was that? It was
like a year ago, I think.
It was over a year ago. Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Which in the AI world, that's like eternity.
That's an eternity. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's why I think it's great to connect and sort of see what's happening. Where's the status now?
Yeah.
I mean, everything's totally different. Not in the role like it's going to change the world, but I think a lot of things that maybe should have been obvious in retrospect are like pretty obvious now.
I know, it's funny looking back, and you're like, I guess that I should have seen that coming. But
a lot of surprises too,
Yeah, we're
definitely
excited to dig into all of it. Could you, for our listeners who, we'll drop a link to the first episode for those listening. We really dig into DeepNewz and the idea, but just for those listening now, Nikolai, could you give a high level, what's the big idea with DeepNewz?
Yeah, so I mean, the idea that we had, I think, was really pretty simple, which is you want to leverage AI to build a news homepage, notifications, app, those kind of experiences, right? So, right. And I think that's kind of the key, is you can do every component of sourcing the stories, writing them, putting them in a format that you like, doing the notification, figuring out which topics you really, really care about. And I think that's kind of, to me, the interesting part. It's not just about putting together and writing the stories, it's building that layer and being able to build things on top of it. So obviously the consumer product is exactly what I think it is. It's like, hey, you want to have a digest, you want to have alerts for really big things. You want to check in and be like, oh, what's going on in this, area of the world, so to speak, or literally. And I think you can do things on top of it too, like some sort of intelligence, or actually we started looking at trading signals for public entities.
Yeah.
That's been kind of an interesting project.
No, that's really cool.
And just to finish the thought, I mean, because people ask like, oh, well, you're just like summarizing the New York Times article or something, and that's not at all what it is. I mean, that makes sense for Bloomberg, right? So if you're in Bloomberg, or you're in New York Times or one of these prestige publications, article summaries are great. People have been doing them manually for a long time, and Cliff's Notes was around when we were kids. And the idea is really like, oh, like I need to read this thing, I should read it, or I need to know, what are sort of the key points. But I think that, we come in from completely different standpoint, which is like, hey, there's a bunch of things going around, mostly tweets, not entirely, but mostly tweets. So you say, aha, there's a new topic that people are talking about. Is there a news story there? Okay, great. Find that, including follow some links and look at the tweets and use some previous context. And that can be anything from, hey, last night the Buffalo Bills made a giant comeback in the football game. I didn't even know because I turned it off. I thought the game was over. You could have today's big AI announcements, whatever they are.
Yeah, right.
It's international news that's sort of translated. So you have all these pieces that are like, I think in retrospect pretty doable. But I think really the cool part becomes using it to build either a sort of like a homepage, on behalf of sort of a company name or a brand that feels like your own, because you can sort of change the tone, you can change the selection. You can really get into these details without having to hire editorial staff to rewrite every article, right?
Right.
Or like I said, use it for something more mechanical, like, hey, I need to know this for my business, or, this is indicative of, there's a, slightly better than 50% chance I should buy the stock.
Right. Oh, that's fascinating when it comes into like the forecasting.
That's right. Yeah, and forecasting, to your point, is very hot right now with prediction markets and things like this. We have workers in prediction market companies. That was really a little bit something that didn't really work out as well as I would have liked, but I think it just as a theme, it's definitely something that everyone's thinking about, not just the money, but sort of aggregating information, figuring out sort of who's a good source, and and putting it out there, for a specific person or vertical or whatever.
Yeah. So what kind of, since we talked to you a little over a year ago, what kind of trends, growth have you seen with DeepNewz? Has it achieved what you were hoping for? Where are you at right now?
Well, yes and no. So I think we had, we really took off usage wise and sign some partners and things like that. I mean, obviously still not huge numbers, but we were growing quite a bit.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, our best growth vector was through search, which is not a great place to rely on. And Google, we did not rank that well in Google. So like a disproportion of our search is coming from Bing, but we were being discovered, we're being like linked on Wikipedia and things like this. Okay. Even the kind of stuff that people were finding was not exactly what I set out to do. There's like a lot of like celebrity news or things that, things that people would search for, that people would find.
Yeah. Interesting.
But everything like this, but also like military updates, all kinds of stuff, and obviously the tech AIs are. So we had that. We had some partnership stuff, but it's it's been tough. I'll be honest. Like it's an expensive service to run. Unfortunately, not really expensive if you have it. Like it's let's put it this way: it's a lot more than $10,000 a month, but it's not like 60. It's not like 100,000 a month. It's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
So for something with enough usage, it's quite good. It's pretty awesome, but we've had to pause some of the live updates. I mean, the costs are pretty high, and it's kind of unfortunate. I think the idea is cool, and we're seeing if we can bring it back, but it's just sort of you're sort of like, I think like a lot of AI companies get into this spot. You're sort of stuck in the middle somewhere where something is cool and valuable, but not necessarily something that it's still sort of seen. I mean, to tell you the truth, is news is seen as a commodity, and mostly rightfully so.
Right.
The information itself is a commodity, so
right.
Like you either basically need to have some special layer, which is very valuable, for an individual or brand, like you're making money or you're attracting sort of users or customers, or you need to be like really, 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 really scaled, which I think is a challenge because
right.
So yeah.
So last time you were on, you were of the opinion that the model progress, shifting gears just slightly, the model progress kind of stall out around GPT-4. Are you still of that opinion, or has your opinion shifted at all?
I don't know if that's a fair representation of what I said. Maybe. I mean, you're not wrong, but I think I don't remember what I said. I should listen to
I'm pulling from my notes from last time, so I may have slightly misstated it in my notes.
I think it definitely slowed down. So look, okay, I'll tell you this. I'll tell you what I believe then and I believe now, which is I think the whole exponential blowout has not happened, right? Obviously gains have been more difficult. This has been the benefit of companies like NVIDIA because the models are much better, but they're like massively more expensive, So I think your listeners are pretty familiar, but we should probably really get into GPT-5 and how we got here and what makes it good, but also frustrating, But like this whole thinking stuff has been on the table. I mean, people have been talking about it for 2 years. It finally launched, and it was a big deal. It was a huge deal, but it's very slow. So forget about the expense. Like I remember, for example, when Grok 4 first came out before they tweaked it, and it's still a bit of a problem, but before they tweaked it, it's like you would ask, the standard thing was like, it would take forever to answer a very, very basic question. Be like, give me a recipe for pancakes. It's like thinking for 17 minutes, And GPT-5 specifically made sure not to do that. But as a result, if you have a question that does require thought, it's not just the tokens and the cost, but like the real cost is you basically have to bully it until it finally tries hard to answer your question. Like that's my experience.
Interesting.
And if you bully it enough, it'll give you the right answer. But like literally the example that I was dealing with last week was I was like, hey, give me a list of 50 billion plus market cap companies like in a particular sector, like technology. And Grok thought for a while and got 20% wrong. And no matter how many times you try, it would never give you the right answer. It gave like close to the right answer, but never the right answer. GPT-5 either oscillated between either like giving you like 5 and ... Like, do you want the rest? I'm like,
just give
really? Like what? Or if you bully it hard enough, it would give you like the fully correct answer. But sometimes it would give you ... Sometimes it would be like, here's how you could solve this problem by looking at a website.
It drives me crazy when it does that.
But here's the thing. But the part that me and you don't notice, which it does do well, is that when it's like, hey, when it gets this complicated answer, when the next question is like, take this and format it as like a Python list, then it uses the quick model. It doesn't think for 5 minutes. So like it is good at the simple things that don't require the web search and a full thing, but it over applies that. And sometimes, look, it just makes a decision. It can't change its mind. Like if it decides early in the thinking process, right? I'm anthropomorphizing it too much, but there is a routing system, and the routing system itself has to be found. So it's like, oh, this is the kind of thing where like we think we can look it up via a website, and it's too late to change its mind, and then so that's why I think like you have to kind of bully it, and it gives you the wrong answer, the wrong strategy. You're like, try the right strategy, And like sometimes it's obstinate and just pushes back, which is super annoying. I don't know why they do that. That's to me is crazy.
It's funny. Yeah, right.
But if you try enough, like if it does listen to your command, it will try the right way. And I think my mostly optimistic take is I think they're going to improve that a lot. They're collecting so much data, but I think it's fundamentally the right method. It's the right method for consumers because look, like, and you probably have the same experience in your life, maybe not, but like, basically all the smart but non-tech people I know use ChatGPT. They use LLMs, and they're very, very astute about what it does well, what it doesn't do well. What they have zero awareness of which model they're using. They don't know if they're using GPT-4, 4 Mini, GPT-5. They have no knowledge. Ben Thompson pointed that out. So people have no idea what model they're using, so they should be routed. And like they do complain about what it does wrong, and they're completely correct. But if you gave them the different buttons, right now there's basically one button, like think less and think more. And no one even listens.
Yeah, I'm curious. Do you have any insight as to the cost difference between GPT-5 and GPT, 4.5, 4, 4.0?
I mean, it's a lot, right? Because they keep changing the pricing. It is very confusing, but I think, but basically think between the cheap and the expensive model, like I think your baseline should be at least 10x.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's outrageous.
But again, that makes sense. If your question is, hey, take this answer you already gave me and reformat it, that's pretty simple. But the real key is not even the model thinking. I think the really hard part is the web search tools, right? Like this is the part that, I'll be honest, I don't use Claude that much for research purposes. I should. I think it's a good model. It's not in my, it's not in my top 7. But but I think people complain a lot about it not being very good at web search. But also with ChatGPT, a ton of people, including people that we know, when it first came out, web search complains like, hey, I just want my AI back. That's like the super intelligent model that thinks and gives me good answers. And like, I don't want it to search the web for everything. But OpenAI, it kind of reminds me like Facebook with Zuckerberg, sort of like in the late, in the sort of the late 2000s, when every time they would make a change, they would have a million emails. My friends were there would tell me, a million emails. This is terrible. You got rid of my favorite experience on Facebook. I'm quitting forever. But they ignored them and they kept moving forward. And I think ChatGPT has done the same thing. Like they're ignoring a lot of their most, their heaviest and most vocal users, and they're just building what they think the users should want in the long run, which I think is correct. I mean, I think as a user, it's scary because they will shut off the thing that you like.
Right.
I mean, they'll also swap models on you and stuff, but that's, just part of the game. You're using an API, you assume it's the same model. One day it's quantized and it's bad. It's just the way it is, I guess we accept it. But the bigger thing is, yes, like I think that the cost differences are large, but like the decision to use the web or not to use the web, I mean, that's the major difference, right? Again, something very simple, but I think it's a great example.
Yeah.
50 billion plus market cap companies. Do you look it up recently? Do you look at it historically? Do you look at a website with a list and compare those lists? Do you actually try to find out the right answer? Do you tap into a financial API? It's super not clear. And to do that across a bunch of different tasks, like, they're trying to sort of give it all to you at the same time. So I think it's not just the model stuff. And yeah, it is a big difference, but it's just the orchestration of it, like what resources we come to bear. And the trade-off between speed and time, and it's a pretty complicated problem, but they're very good at it.
I noticed on DeepNewz, kind of related to these changes in LLM models, that it's often now disclosed which model.
Oh, we've always pushed it, yeah.
Has that always been there?
Oh, yeah. It's in small letters. The point is not to bring attention to it. Like, there's nothing about what we did where we put it in your face. This is AI giving you the news, Like, I always thought from the beginning that was, like, super, like, not cool, But we don't hide it. Like, we don't pretend it's not AI. I think that's bad, too, when people don't tell you you're AI, like a lot of the people who reply on Twitter, but, like, if you know and you can trace it, it's cool, but, like, you're not trying to, like, put it in someone's face. I will say this, for our task for writing, I mean, nothing beat the O3 model. The O3 model continued being very, very good.
Really?
For 4.1, which is like, I guess the best non-thinking model, is also quite good. But again, it's not thinking. So it's not really set up. You can do your own prompt and do your own rewriting. But for like an article, if you think about it, you do kind of want to do a draft, right? So sometimes it was in the middle, and we actually had different prompts for thinking and non-thinking models because we always had rewriting. But with the non-thinking models, we just told it how to rewrite. So we told it how to think. And those prompts don't work well with a model that's already thinking. So you have to like prompt it differently. But at this point, yeah, for anything like that, the thinking models are great. Some are greater than others. I think that there is a benefit in some tasks for something like a 4.1, which is like the best non-thinking model. Sometimes it's more direct. It's a little bit faster. There are individual cases where that's better. But generally speaking, I think, it's like say you're like GM, or one of these car companies. Like you're going to have like models, car models that fit different things. Oh, that's an analogy I'm sure I used last time, even though I haven't used it in a while. But like the airplane versus car,
good.
right? It's like, you have cars are basically the same, more or less. But there are differences that matter. A truck is different from from minivan, but they're not that different. They're still like all purpose,
Right.
Whereas airplanes are very specialized. Like literally when you swap, when you transfer, depending on, the length of your flight, you're going to get on a different plane. So,
Right.
I think LLMs are somewhere in the middle, but it's cars. Cars was always the analogy. That's what I always said. And I think it's just, now we're getting at the level where, you're going to want to have a truck and the minivan. I mean, the model that's great is 4.1 Mini. 4.1 Mini is an excellent model. I think it's a really, really good model for what it is, because it's really fast. It's dirt cheap. And it's really, really good for a lot of tasks. Like it writes really good draft articles. A lot of the stuff on DeepNewz just used 4.1 Mini because more expensive models are better, but not by much. Like, for example, tagging categories. Like, hey, out of our like 300 categories, is okay, cool. This is about like the Middle East, and energy and computer science, whatever, right? Like 4.1 Mini is good enough to do that. So that's a good model.
Yeah, I'm curious. How do you audit the quality, the relative quality of these models for DeepNewz? Is there an evaluation, or is it pure vibes? Like you read it and you're like, this sucks. We're not using that.
Yeah, just pure side by sides, and mostly for like prompt engineering. Although that prompt engineering became both more valuable, but also easier, but also like less valuable at the same time. If that makes any sense.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
I still think, that's like my hot take, by the way, on the current models. I don't know if it's 100% true, but I think it's mostly true that, fine tuning, obviously for video models, that's here, not just to make everything into nudes, but that's probably the most common fine tuning, but there's others, but like no one even does like LoRa and LLMs anymore. And it just doesn't make sense because, I was talking to, to sort of a researcher friend who's sort of, out there in like, the 8-point precision streets, doing those level stuff that I kind of got away from some years ago. And the reality is if the output that you want is within the distribution of the model, it's not obvious. Like if the model is like good, subject itself to prompting, like if the model responds well to prompting, like unlike like 3.5 or some other models, but generally the models, especially the OpenAI models, respond really well to prompting, with a few exceptions. Like if you're saying, hey, do this thing, which is still inside its distribution, there's no particular reason to think you couldn't find it through a prompt that you could find through fine tuning, right? And actually, everyone's seen like the Claude prompt, which is, about the length of the Bible. It's so long, but it works, right? So
So what would you say you've seen is in prompt strategy? What now is important versus what used to be important with like 4.1, for example?
So before thinking, you basically had to tell it how to think. So a lot of the prompting was focused on like collect this information, basically get like the pieces of your answer, put them together, blah blah blah, right? Now it sort of does it for you already. So now I think it's a matter of basically telling it how to sort of people still have it check its work, but like you have to decide what you mean by that, So I think that's a big chunk of it. I guess the buzzword is agents, right? So it's like you have this persona, you have this persona. I guess everyone does these multi-agent setups now. I've done that a little bit, but I wouldn't say I have some expertise in there. But basically have, hack some way to come up with like multiple answers or multiple things. And, like fundamentally you're trying to, when you want an output, you care about what? You care about, the information and the structure, right? So probably have to sort of describe those separately.
Yeah. So, we've talked a lot about
examples like that. That is the real question, right? Is like multi-shot, right? How well can you do by just providing a few examples?
Yeah, no, for sure. We've talked a lot. OpenAI, ChatGPT keeps coming up.
Yeah.
mentioned Anthropic, all these different things. Do you think it'll just continue to consolidate into these massive players? Meta.
I mean, it looks that way,
OpenAI.
right? I mean, it sure looks that way. I mean, and it's crazy, right? Because just look at the structure of it. So for consumer LLMs, SimilarWeb publishes this every week, and OpenAI ChatGPT is consistently around 80%. And the exact number doesn't matter. If it's trending up or down, doesn't matter. The point is, 2 years ago, would we have guessed that they would have 80% of the consumer market? No, I would not have. It certainly was in the range of possibility, but if you gave it a, I'm sure somebody predicted it.
Massive.
Yeah, and the whole market's grown. So you have these individual pieces that are growing, and everyone will show their awesome growth rate. But as far as market share, like, it's a Google-like market share. It's freaking crazy.
Right.
Yeah. It's
So-
wild.
Do you think there's any chance for some of these open source companies to continue making noise, or do you think they're kind of their time in the sun is over? So
No.
News recently released Hermes 4. I think it was Hermes 4, and
Yeah.
then of course DeepSeek. I don't know what they're up to lately, but presumably they're doing some kind of magic over there, and they're going to release some more models at some point.
Yeah, they ran into some problems.
Where do you
in the
think
world.
they have a place in the market?
Of course, yeah. I mean, no, they're very important. I think that, and this is like a simplification, obviously, but
Yeah.
there's a quote from Conor McGregor. It says, we're here to take over. We're not just here to take part, right? And everyone comes in and they say they're going to take over, but I think it's okay to take part. Like, if you look at all these
Right.
companies, I mean, it's just that the pie is growing, and they have individual cases that, like, they're just all this substructure, right? So
Yeah.
I think, like, DeepSeek basically having the crown, despite Kimi's success as the best open source model, huge usage, right? Very big deal, very, very helpful. Anthropic, like, very strong for coding models, and it's used by other people for other things, but basically for coding. I mean, XAI has its things that's a little bit less clear, but I think there's definitely models that are dead and don't matter, but being the best in sort of smaller, being sort of dominant, like, there's other sort of, like, places to be number one that matter, right?
Yeah.
And all of it's growing, and also, I mean, obviously you have the white label situation. So I think, most of the AI companies that are, like, succeeding and finding customers and growing are basically like wrappers, which is fine. The wrappers got a bad name, but wrappers are great. And now that everyone understands that it's probably not a good idea to train your own frontier models, like, it just isn't. Or, like, news can, they used to do all these interesting things with, like, model, stapling or merging or whatever, was cool. That stuff doesn't really matter anymore, unfortunately. But anyway, I mean, Apple has this niche with running, training models you can build in device, and there's a bunch of different stuff. But the bottom line is, for consumer applications, you're mostly a wrapper, or you're building a completely different projects with intelligence built in, which we'll get to in a second. But if you're doing that, like, then you don't have to use ChatGPT. You can use something else. True users fundamentally don't care that much, right? Maybe they do, but it's a little bit like, when you get your burger. I don't. Apologies to the vegans, but if you're getting, if you're getting a burger at your restaurant, like, the branding is the burger, like the restaurant. It's not the underlying beef, and some people will be like, Impossible Burger, or Angus Burger. They try to build Angus into a brand. It's just a breed of cattle,
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
you go to Europe, they'll be like, Argentinian steak. Ooh, it's different. And it is good. Argentinian steak is amazing, but it's a relatively weak brand, right? Whereas when you're buying direct, if you're buying the meat, if you're buying the meat from your butcher and you're making it yourself, which is kind of ChatGPT, then you do care about the meat, and there is branding. Yeah. So I think that there's a huge market for good coding models, good specialty models, the best open source model. Some applications just need to use open source, things that are used underneath. Right. So we've had, I mean, not to say anything bad about our friends, but, like, we've sort of, there was kind of a big article recently kind of confirming what a lot of us have been seeing, which is kind of like vector databases maybe don't work as well as we thought. So, but putting that aside, I mean, if you're using a vector database that fundamentally has some sort of LLM embeddings to help you search for documents and whatever, like, for that, you are probably going to use the best open source embedding you can get, because, otherwise you're tied into this proprietary API and they can shut it off. Now we actually don't do that. So we used open source So we used we used the the embeddings from OpenAI because I think they're really good. But I think if we were to rebuild DeepNewz from scratch and re-embed everything, I would absolutely use the best open source models because you can download it, you can rely on it.
Right,
You do have this weird dependency in your freaking database, right? Where like your similarity vector is based on a function, that is like metered by a company. You don't want that.
That's scary. Yeah.
Well, it's just and I think a lot of these questions about AI usage really kind of come down to that. Is like, for example, I mean, I was talking to one today, but you talk to people like in VC, lawyers, and what's the other one? I'm blanking, but basically, like, there's a certain class of people who are like, hey, the LLMs are really good as like a research associate, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but like, why does that work?
Well.
But like, why does that work? The reason that works is because like the task has some discretion, which the AI is good at, whereas like Excel is not good at discretion. Excel gives you very exact answers to exact questions. These are like approximate questions. You want good enough answers. But that's what it is. If your job calls for like 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10 answers, the LLMs can do it well. So like in theory, it's as good as an associate. And then that's kind of how you think you want to think about quality, and that's where branding comes in, So I think that
what is it that, like, what prevents it from getting to the 10 out of 10? Is that user error, or is that the models trained to be mid? We've like heard a lot about that, but like models are trained to give like an affordable, good enough answer. Yeah.
I mean, interesting framing, fundamentally correct. That's right. Like these things give you sort of the most likely token, the average token, whatever. And yes, that's subject to some randomness and beam search and whatever, but fundamentally it is trying to give you sort of, at core, the model strains towards giving you the consensus, most common, most likely answer. Like, for example, like now you can swing around that. You can also give the model insane randomness, and you can try a million things and try to choose the best one. But like a system you would have to write a really good song or like really good comedy is just like different. You can use AI for that, but it's different. Whereas the answers people want, what's clearly working is like, hey, take this contract, like change a bunch of names and like make it work. And that works fine. Or it's like, hey, write to me like this decent email, or do this like, what's the TAM, right? All the VCs say, oh, they just want to research, how big is this business can be. Like, report on this thing. Whereas like, okay, like even like for an interview, like some people obviously use AI to like suggest questions for an interview. But I guess, have you seen Kill Tony, the comedy show?
No.
Oh.
I should.
Well, so what he does, right, is he has these comedians on who are like random and sometimes really random. And they do a 1 minute of comedy, so it's not too long. And then he asks them questions, like find out about them. So it's kind of like an interview show.
Love that.
I don't know how he does it, but his interviews are freaking amazing. Like sometimes he'll have other people come in and do it once in a while as like a lark. They've had like, his friends who are also high level comedians come in as like and act like Tony for the day. And it's just so much worse. Like he's just really, really good at like asking the right question at the right time. And it's like, could an LLM do that? And maybe it could even like imitate Tony Hinchcliffe and try to be like him, but I just think when it goes to being 10 out of 10 to being exceptional is very different in some ways than what it takes to be 8 out of 10.
You can get 8 out of 10 with just kind of being in the roughly the right area. This is how I've thought of it. Is like you can be roughly in the right area, and that's an 8 out of 10. But is it?
You want to be slightly above average.
Precision.
Yeah, like the AI basically is like gets like, I mean, like literally on homework, according to some people like Elon, it's like the best ever. But yeah, like basically, if you think about it, it's something that would get you like a B or maybe like an A on an essay. Like the models are good; they are better than most people.
Absolutely.
But like, is it going to get you something? Like, is it going to write Harry Potter? No, it's not. It'll write something. It can write a franchise of Harry Potter, maybe. If you have existing IP, it could like, but it's not going to invent something new and surprising. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's
So sorry. By the way, just to finish the thought, I mean to interrupt, but like that's what kind of I think to me was truly amazing. What we did with DeepNewz is that like that's the key. Is it's like, hey, you have this new thing, you have these interesting tweets about this interesting topic. To actually write about that in a succinct way, like the reason it's good is you're basing it off like what some of the best writers on the internet are posting. And it still has choice. It can say, hey, this is more interesting than this other thing. Which quote to use? How do you sort of phrase this well? But it's great because it's like grounded in in not
good
just
writing.
facts. And that's exactly, not just in facts,
and
in human thought. And these people are amazing at Twitter.
That's
so.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the other reason why I think that the LLMs are a good fit for something like DeepNewz is what's the word, expediency, for lack of a better term. With news, so much of it is just getting the immediacy of the notification out there, right? So LLMs can be so much better than humans within that narrow bound, right? Where it's like, I can be watching Twitter all day long, but it's going to take all of my attention. You can have an LLM feed that is watching Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, right? Like you can split its attention more or less.
That's right.
So it's really interesting that way.
Well, you look at it for like something like stocks, right? I mean, we do something for other things, but I think the finance ones were, I think, the best. And what do you really want to know? It's like, hey, what's the most efficient way so I can learn in like a minute what the hell's going on with the stock market today? And it was really good at that. It's like, oh, you had this big move, you had rates, you know what I mean, this thing, and you can look at it over time. What was the market focusing? Oh, it's the Bitcoin Treasuries company today. It's the tariffs on this day. It's this, and it's very accurate with that, and it gets directly to the point. I mean, someone will steal this idea, I think, and they should. But it's like, you go to something like a Robinhood or even Yahoo Finance, which is very good, but it's still like a little bit too much, Or you don't have a homepage. The homepage should really be like, hey, you're interested in the market. Before you even get into personalization, what's my portfolio doing? What are the themes? What are the narratives? What are the big stories, the video clips? All that stuff is great. Before that, it's like, what are the top 3 things that are happening today? Where you see, you shouldn't even have to ask the question. You see like, NVIDIA moved by 3%. That's a lot for multi-trillion-dollar company. Why? What's the single bullet point? Not even 3 or 5. Initially, we had 3 or 5. 1.
Yeah, just 1.
What happened today? And if nothing happened, then you can say that. Or if you trust the model enough, it's like, this is relatively small news. Okay, it's maybe something else, And then you can do then next you can do the follow-up. You can say, because the whole sector was down. Like this thing moved because of this other stock. And you don't know for sure, but I think that sort of logic and simplicity is super cool. Like I said for the NFL yesterday, it's like, hey, just tell me. Like I don't want just the scores, that's too much numbers, but like what are the things that happened? Give me the 2 bullet points. That's it.
Right.
I'm curious, and I don't think that this would necessarily be a great feature fit for DeepNewz, but I am curious if you've ever explored this. Have you ever explored any type of personalization features on DeepNewz in any way?
Of course. Well, yeah. I mean, no. So especially for notifications, right? You pick your topics, and there's hundreds of them, and they overlap a lot. So you can choose a bigger or smaller one, I mean, really, in the long run, we would have wanted to get all the way down to the entity level, because a lot of people ask for that, especially early on. They're like, hey, I have outstanding stock in this company. I want to know anything about this company.
Like everything.
No one ever talks about.
Yeah.
Like the Google alerts, right? Like, which was a good idea as a product, was kind of whatever. It was never really took off. But I think,
I used it a lot. I think that's probably one of the only ones.
A lot of people used it, but it was always niche, right? So exactly. So I think the idea, I think that's kind of the idea. It should just be good. And that's first. And then you can just, at different levels, just the select, and ideally select it for you. Like you just shouldn't, if you're like, hey, I want big top level sports, you're going to get the tennis, even though you forget about the tennis. You're going to get the Olympics, like you forget about the Olympics. But the reality, I mean, that's the guesses. That would be the best case scenario based on how you interact. It just figures out. But it's literally going to be how novel and interesting is this? What other topics you're interested in? And in fact, I mean, we didn't end up doing that much with personalization. We always have personalization, but it's always something you do later. But I think like we actually, I mean, in some ways we even had a deeper graph, right? Because we also had the list of all the authors that we used, which was tens of thousands of authors. And we actually know what articles and topics they talked about. So you can even do a graph where you can say, hey, you're actually interested in this topic, and which topics are related to each other. Well, you can actually see it. Like you don't even need the co-user. You actually have a strong relationship between the authors, which are going to be pretty similar. So, for example, if you're, what is it, the T-Pod, right? Like this part of Twitter, like you can make that graph of those connections. I think even from our data pretty easily. But I offer the data to researchers, and no one really ever wanted to study it for whatever reason. I guess they had more important things to do. But I think it's interesting.
Yeah,
I mean, it changes a lot. Like new topics come up, right? So I think that's. So yeah, in the long run, you want to tag some high level. You want to do both. Ideally, you want to connect explicit user feedback with implicit stuff, right? That's really the magic. Like that's one of the things that Twitter doesn't do a good job with. Like they do implicit and explicit, but nobody even knows about the explicit, and it's kind of bad and was never really rebuilt. And they don't work well together. Like you should be able to say, here's what I think I want, and then it discovers what you kind of like or people like you like, and it blends them nicely. That's the dream.
Which platform do you think does that best? You said X doesn't do that great. Do you think other platforms have kind of started to figure that out?
Well, it's different stuff. So I think that, I mean, for me, and I think for most, let's just say a little bit older, not like old, but you know what I mean, like not Zoomer, kind of like it's somewhat intellectual focused people. It's not even close to YouTube. YouTube is the best. It's really not close at all.
I've heard that multiple times actually. Yeah.
Oh, it's so amazing. But YouTube is very different from news, and actually we were posting news videos in there for a while. And news, it doesn't handle that well because it's not a news focused platform. I think in the long run they will get into it. They will probably, find somebody like myself who's interested and bring a team around, and they'll crush it in news. I don't think it's a huge priority, but they're amazing. And obviously mainly because just the vast library and the fact that creators can make enough money to make it, whatever. The whole system's amazing. But
it's pretty
the difference between Instagram and YouTube is that Instagram still tries to give you novelty. So it'll show you completely random, unrelated things. So it tries to guess harder. And sometimes you discover something and you're kind of into it for a while. You're in and out of it. It's sort of figured to those tastes. I don't really use TikTok, so I don't know how that is, but maybe that's the same. I don't know. But like Instagram is really good at Reels, at being like, hey, there's a creator and trying you a couple times. And sometimes you find a creator you like and you're into them for a couple months and then you're not into them anymore. It handles that really, really well. So as far as grabbing that attention and discovery, that's the best. But as far as just like YouTube also has discovery, and they want to allow new channels to build. But if they find that you like a topic, like in my case, it's the travel videos, you're in it for life because you can never finish it in terms of like travel, history, geography. I love these things. And it does a good job of not burning you out too much, but it really finds your things and it does very little exploration.
What's interesting
where Instagram will do a lot of explore. Because I think it wants you again to find those short-term things, and it's going to burn you out, and that's okay, and you're going to move on. But like, dude, if I can go to YouTube, and it'll just be history, geography, and like comedy, and that will never end. And it's very pleasant. And it has that intellectual level too. Like you can learn things if you want to learn, jiu-jitsu technique or chess or history. Like it's still brain rot, but like it's like high quality brain.
It's tasteful brain rot. Yeah.
And it finds your tastes. It'll, I don't know how it is for everybody, but they've always been good at this. So, always, for a long time. So I remember, wasn't that long ago, but YouTube used to not have good recommendations. And I'll give you an example. So I remember looking at NBA videos, and I saw an NBA video, and it's like, here's a dunk from Vince Carter from 12 years ago. That's what the recommendations used to be like. Like, but this is pre-deep learning, pre all this stuff. And they put a lot of effort, and DeepMind apparently had a big part to play in it all before, the current AI revolution with LLMs and all that. But so at this point, it's just like much more powerful. Basic things used to be difficult and expensive. But I'm saying for the longest time, they've been doing this level of personalization, specifically for ads.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, they also have very old ad platforms. So for example, movies, right? So you probably know this, but you would guess. I don't get movie trailers anymore. I think YouTube figures out I haven't seen a movie in theaters in years, but that used to be a big business, and I'm sure it still is. Like, it's going to show different trailers to different people based on their interest and perceived demographics. Like, your mom and your younger sister are going to get very different trailers, maybe even different trailers for the same movie. So they've always been in that world, because of the video ads, but they've had to make these implicit understandings even before deep learning. So they're amazing. And that's my theory. I haven't seen the numbers, but I think that's where all the marginal attention is going. I think YouTube is soaking up a lot of it. So like, I don't even necessarily think it's something that Twitter has done wrong. I think they can do a better job, but like, where's the excess attention going? It's like, it's a lot easier to get stuck, for an hour and you have a pleasant experience on YouTube than anywhere else.
Yeah.
And I also think that there's something to be said that platforms like YouTube and TikTok have a ton of info that they can gather, right? Like Twitter can't tell how many times I reread a tweet. They can only tell, if it's on my screen or not, right? Whereas YouTube, TikTok, you can.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, it's both. I mean, I used to work at Twitter. I mean, yes, they could use better use of the demographic info, but I think those other platforms just have better content in some ways, and the big head start. Like so they tried to make video on Twitter work basically like Reels like twice, right. And it's kind of there, but it's kind of okay. Like it's the only time I've really found it useful is if it's like Google I/O. Like something news based like that, and it's like, oh, show me the clips because I can't be bothered to watch it, and it'll do a decent job there. I think some people have the streaming and the shows, like the live streaming on, I mean, Twitter kind of had it first. Anyway, we can have a long Twitter discussion, but I think it's it's tough, it's tough. But I think
gears like, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, shifting gears slightly. So I've been noticing something that I have noticed in the last few months, especially, is AI usage creeping in more and more in news articles. For the most part, I see it at there will be a little blurb at the top where it's like, these instant takeaways for the article were generated with ChatGPT, something along those lines. And I think that I may have asked you this question last time you were on here, but I'd be curious to hear the answer again. A known problem with AI is, they prefer AI generated text to human written text in a lot of cases. Have you seen that problem crop up with DeepNewz, or is your source feed so diverse that it doesn't really matter that much to purposes?
For us is not an easily detectable issue. But it definitely happens. I mean, it's definitely a huge problem, when you use ChatGPT or Grok, right? Because it's going to prefer websites and the websites that have a lot of stuff filled in. So I kind of have like I'm not going to say who it is, but like there was a company we were talking to, working with, and we proposed writing a bunch of basically republishing our finance articles for them, for their audience. I mean, they're pretty largest websites. I did the math. I showed them how it would work. The articles are good. We built them an RSS feed, and they're like, "Hey, can you make it custom?" Like, yeah. I mean, let's just try this, but we can change the prompt. We can regenerate it. Like, we can make it an original article that's not on our website. But they were still a little hesitant. But then they had a bunch of let's say not very highly paid authors writing articles on their behalf. And I looked at a bunch of these articles, and I'm like, some of these are clearly written by AI.
Oh yeah, it's creeping around the edges.
How could that be? Like, which author is it? We'll find them. I'm like, but how could it not be? Like, you're paying a bunch of people to write. You're paying people to write articles. Why would they not use AI? It's like
that's its bread and butter. Right?
At a bare minimum, every writer is going to run into a paragraph. They're like, I don't know how to phrase this. I don't want to phrase this. I'm going to ask my robot friend, right? Like,
so the writing editing,
that even the writers who are claiming that they don't do that, I can guarantee that they are. Guaranteed.
For sure. But it's like especially for research. You have to write an article. Yeah. Say you're working for a prestigious publication, but you have to write like 5 updates about AI per day. Like you're not going to use crazy.
Yeah.
So that's why I think look, and that's the big thing. A lot of people are like, hey, you should do some curation, this, that. The only thing that we were very stringent on from the beginning is like, hey, no matter what the quality is, we got to make it work, this or that. It's got to be fully automated. That's the key. Like, if you're focusing on full automation, then I think the halfway is sort of just, like, you're either going to be human and you're going to use a little bit of AI, or you're AI and maybe like the human tweaks, some selection criteria, or like I rerun the algorithm, which authors do we use, and we kick out some of the authors that we don't like because they're AI, or they're like nonsense, or they're like, they say too many jokes that the model misunderstands or whatever,
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But I think but yeah, dude, I mean, it's crazy, especially in the finance space. I mean, you look at some of these big websites, especially the ones that republish, like Zacks and things like that.
Yeah.
It's all AI, and it's not bad, but it's very verbose, it's long. It's like, dude, like, it's funny. AI is being used to summarize humans to get to the point, but it can't do it itself in its own articles. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is funny. Yeah. Huh. So can you walk me through real quick, and you may have done this last time you came on, but I'm curious if it's changed at all also. Just like the pipeline for DeepNewz, like how does it what's from start to finish? It's monitoring X. It pulls a tweet. Like, what does that look like from finding a tweet with a news article to
Okay,
posting?
so again, it's not finding the tweet or the news article. That's sort of the common misconception. They're like, hey, like, you know, people are like, hey, oh, great, you pulled this from the New York Times article. Like, we're really not. But they're like, but you are using the New York. I'm like, we're not. Like, we can, you know what I mean? So the thing about it is, look, you basically find the accounts through lists or filtering or whatever. We built a bunch of things and then we sort of filtered out the accounts that were like low information or too repetitive or whatever. Because some accounts are very high volume, you know, and you want to kind of clean them out, right? But anyway, not too much of that. So you have your list that you're constantly monitoring, and if through the API you get those immediately in real time.
Right.
So you have this thing that's basically accumulating information. Then it has to be a batch process, but at every point in time, let's just say every 5 minutes, you run like a small clustering. And there's some details and do it, but basically that's sort of the magic of clustering. If you run some of these hierarchical clustering algorithms, it's good enough where it gives you proposals. You know, it says, hey, there's pockets of people, you know, or not of people of messages that seem to be sort of related, right? And there's some thresholding and there's some thinking, and do you keep older messages? There's a bunch of details which matter, but fundamentally that's what you're doing. And then you take a pocket there, and then you say, hey, okay, take this information, is basically write a draft article. You know, is this an article? Is this something we already have based on the text or the previous, basically information overlap, right? So if this thing has like a 90% overlap, or even lower than that with the previous thing, it's either an update or it's just the same thing. And then basically when you decide, hey, this meets these cutoffs, sounds like news.
Okay.
And it's worth writing, then you pull in other stuff. You can pull out outside context. Yes, then you can read information from the links. At the very least, get the metadata. You know, but if it's not, if it's not a paid walled article, then you can pull the full text if you want. You know, the other beautiful thing about tweets is they're short, so you can really do this at scale in a way you could never do with documents. Like documents can be arbitrarily long, so you have to arbitrarily cut them. Tweets have limitations, right? And they're meant to be short. And I mean, it is good at discovering articles, because obviously if a bunch of people share the same article, then that's just automatically going to cluster. But the beauty is you have things that cluster that are not articles. And actually, if you get a cluster, then you can do a secondary step and you can do more research among your already existing thing. So you can say, okay, here's our candidate. Are there other things that we missed that are kind of close in the space but didn't quite cluster? So if you have really like original thoughts, and people write like longer essays and opinion pieces, you know. Like I'm struggling to find a good example, but the best canonical example we started was, do you remember when like everyone got stuck in the mud at Burning Man 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Like that was like at the very beginning of DeepNewz, and that was like one of the first few things we wrote, and we had very good coverage for that. But it's completely organic. It's like, yes, later there were articles in the New York Times, but it was just like, you know, basically VC is posting their pictures and that they're stuck in the mud and like laughing about it a little bit. So like, but even then, even that clusters, you know, like you have to maybe try a couple of times, but you can have, I mean, it's kind of amazing that this works, you know, and sometimes it splits things too much and sometimes it combines things, you know, you still have situations where it's like, oh, you know, Shopify and its competitor are both reporting earnings. It's like, maybe there should be two different articles, but,
I see.
But you try to fix that in post, because then you give the instruction to the model, especially the smarter models. Hey, if it's multiple things, write about the main thing.
Got it.
So there's a lot of details. It's a lot of details,
Wow.
But I'll tell you why it works. The key to it working is the time concept. So everything I just described, it's kind of a miracle that it works as well as it does for this system, because it's a little bit like, okay, it's gonna sound pompous, but you know the whole like LASIK surgery, which obviously I haven't had, and it's like, like the whole thing depends on your retina will just reattach. Like it's like
right.
Like clustering is like that. It just works. It's amazing. But like you can improve it and you can use it, whatever thing works. But I think part of why it works is that, and this is why Twitter is amazing, is it's X or whatever. It's a very strong time component. If you took tweets over a month, it would be a disaster. In fact, if you had the tweets over a month, you would literally want to run it this way in like small time windows. And the time windows doesn't have to be that small, but That's just what it is. If your authors are good enough and your content is good enough and people are generally truthfully talking about very recent things, then the time component really makes it work in a pretty magical way. But if you look, but even if you looked at, say, New York Times articles, which again would be harder to cluster because whatever, but like, if you looked over years, you would get clustering from many months ago. They're like, like you would cluster updates from, Trump 1 and Trump 2. That would make no sense.
So you get some funny, not as much anymore, but when Twitter was first rolling out their LLM based news aggregation, you got some funny combinations like that. Like,
yes,
I don't remember what it was, but there was like one point where it was like, like a Pirates baseball game and like some pirates in Somalia got combined into the same story, something ridiculous like that.
Totally. And now the model will be better, but if you got rid of the time component, you would still have a situation where it would be like, like the Pirates like won an extra innings today and also 2 weeks ago. Which is like cool. And cool. And like a human could write that article and have taste and that would make sense, but like it still gets put into the whole like alien intelligence thing that like I talked about with Razib. Like the AI is still like a little bit of an alien. It doesn't really like understand our world, right? It just is really smart.
You know what it reminds me of is when you're watching like a sports, a sports presentation, a game of some kind, and they just bring up the most random stats. They're like, this is the first time that someone has hit 3 home runs on a Tuesday night in the rain since 1972. And it's like, oh, really cool, man.
Wow.
Amazing.
Oh my God. Those things are ridiculous to me. I don't understand why they do them, where they have like the whole like sports AI powered by IBM and it's like telling you some nonsense.
Yeah, you're like,
but why?
Does not matter. Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. They're like, or like I saw one the other day, they were like the IBM AI was trying to see who was going to win the women's final tennis. It's like, what? Just show us like the lines on Kalshi and Polymarket. Like that actually makes sense. Or you can do, sometimes stats make sense. They're like, hey, like no one's ever come back, But again, the winning probability does this too. But they had the crazy one. I think it was from the French Open. They had like the insane comeback, if you remember that.
Yeah.
Like, I was watching that live for some reason. It was insane. I sat there for 2 hours and watched it on my phone. It was unbelievable. Like I thought it was over, and it was not over at all. I mean, the guy was like, he was down 2 sets and 5 match points. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
It was crazy. So there's interesting stats, but I think you don't want to use AI to try to figure out, who's the better talent.
What's interesting.
Yeah.
Just look at the prediction market.
Exactly. So I guess, Nikolai, I know as we're starting to kind of wrap up a little bit, because we're going to have you on again, because now this is the second time we want to have you on again. So I'm curious if you could make a prediction for the AI space, whether it's agents are going to go, agents are the future, LLM, like whatever it is, what prediction do you think over the next year, what's going to happen in the AI space?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I'll start a little bit with a wind up a little bit. I'll start with a little bit of nowcasting. So what has happened, like that we didn't cover? So look, I mean, it's kind of where we started. The consolidation where like the usage is very high. The compute demands are very high. This is very good for NVIDIA as a stockholder. I'm very happy. But you have this concentration at the top, right? Like, the big LLMs are being used a lot, even within those and beyond that. So, so one of the effects has been, I think, a lot of companies got funded in 22, 23 that are like, pivoting for the third time and losing business or being bought out. OpenAI started, they had the big announcement they're going to do they're going to try to do a recruiting service, which kind of makes sense actually. I don't think it's a crazy idea. Like maybe, are they going to do a better job with AI for recruiting than LinkedIn? Maybe, So I think that, I don't know if it's a crazy prediction. I'll give you a crazy one in a second, but I think that we're going to see OpenAI in particular go into more verticals, not just, start some buy things they're going to consolidate. Like they really are sort of building the next Google, So that's very interesting. How's that's going to go. I think we are going to see some new style companies that really just build a new company with sort of AI assumptions in mind. But I think that has to be something that OpenAI isn't going to do. And that specifically means AI is in the background.
I see.
So again, self-serving example, but like the AI trading thing, I think is hot for a reason. People are interested in that. They're like, AI can do blah, 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 but what's your output? Your output is actually either money or trades, or I think more likely, it's not going to summarize the research for you. It's actually going to tell you, hey, like, this is a book that you can run,
Yeah.
I think that's becoming popular in the crypto space. So like crypto, obviously crypto's dying for something, so they want to power these agents and give them money and stuff. So I don't know if agents are going to solve. I don't think agents are going to solve old problems, but maybe agents will start to solve new problems that we haven't really thought of. So I do think we're going to see. I do think a year from now we are going to see some real new use cases emerge that are both AI powering things, and then also on the other end, AI, like maybe even very simple AI stuff, doing new things that didn't really exist. And I think the limitation is, that this works best in fully digital spaces. So that's really the issue. I think attaching things to the real world is like a mistake, right? Like you don't want AI doing Uber. That's like a step too. Right. So the question is, what are going to be? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna concur with you that Jake, a trend that Jake and I are seeing increasingly on the show and just in our personal lives is people building companies, not necessarily building AI companies, but building companies with AI. 2-3 person teams that are hyper scaling because they have 100 agents that do all of their biz dev for them.
Yeah, I listen to those shows. I'll be honest, I'm very skeptical. I believe that they're doing it. I believe that they're doing it. I don't know if it moves the needle. You know what I mean? Like in some areas it does, but I think also AI powers the imagination. Like I have a friend I do jujitsu with who kind of got into AI this year. He's a sales guy, non-technical but smart guy, very smart guy.
Yeah,
and he uses AI all the time. He builds these flows. He, his bread and butter is writing individualized sales reports, and he's very good at that. But he's convinced that AI can do anything, anything. So that's great. So I think.
Yeah.
I think those kind of people are powering the use cases for ChatGPT type stuff.
Right.
Which is, I kind of basically what I'm saying is this. Okay, let's disentangle this a little bit. ChatGPT. So OpenAI is doing two things. They are at the frontier of not necessarily the research, but deploying the best new models. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And they still thankfully serve an API. If you listen to Ben Thompson, he's been screaming at them for 2 years not to do it, but thankfully they are. It's they shouldn't be. He's right. They should focus on the consumer thing. And if they ran out of GPUs, they should favor the consumer over the API. But they're building the best models. But they're also essentially running this, I almost want to say, legacy business of the chatbot, the interactive chatbot. And yes, you can plug in your agents to do sales, and it's a persona. You know what I mean? And people are making fun of Facebook for doing the AI stepmom, and that is ridiculous. Although whatever, people like it. But that's the thing. It's a legacy boomer thing. And so is the ChatGPT thing. It's just a much smarter, much cooler version of the same thing.
Right.
My friend who's another jiu-jitsu guy who's a private chef at on yachts and stuff like that, right? He's using ChatGPT to answer his question instead of looking up his cooking books, right? Or to remind him what to do. You know what I mean? And it's I think that kind of those cases, ChatGPT is going to dominate it, and those are amazing, and that's going to grow. Okay. And that even gets into some of the Ethan Malnick stuff, But that to me is already the legacy. And I think companies that try to compete in that space, it's going to be very hard. So I think, again, you're going to see, I don't know what it is. I keep thinking of examples, but things that are built in deeply ground up from AI built in.
Yeah.
And that's going to be hard. Vector databases failed. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but they haven't been a huge success, So, and that's a problem, right? I mean, if you're trying to do a recruiting service that finds really good niche people, it's actually not that easy. It's actually using AI for search is kind of shitty, But I think we're going to see some progress both from OpenAI and I think from new entrants.
Interesting.
But then I do think the agent thing. Is going to take off a little bit, like an actual agent thing, not like a proxy. But I think it's going to have to be really, really pure virtual, sort of kind of small, simple, weird things, I guess, if you look at where the agents are being used again in the crypto sense, it's deploy some sort of arbitrage strategy, between different prediction markets, right? Or, things like that, farm some rewards, not very AI, you know.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
mean,
that makes sense.
because I don't really see a lot of modeling improvements coming at this point. I mean, I think it's going to take a while to digest GPT-5 and the routing and all that stuff, but it's like it's not a research problem, you know. It's like a product problem for the most part.
Yep.
I mean,
No,
one thing
I
I'd love
agree.
to see, one thing I'd love to see, which I don't think is going to happen. I mean, because if it were to happen, I would have had it by now. But like, I still don't really quite understand why we don't have AI models that update to have like a knowledge base, you know, up to a week, you know, or a month,
Mm,
you know,
yeah. Right.
like even now, even if you don't prompt it correctly, O3 will say former President Donald Trump in DeepNewz articles.
Hmm.
Like it's that old, you know, and it's a great model.
Yeah.
So I think like, you know, really recent world knowledge, you know, really good coverage of automatic translation of international
Right.
stuff. Like that sort of stuff is still kind of not there, which makes you wonder if there's a market for it or not, you know?
Got it.
Yeah.
And sort of related but very different personas, right? I mean, that I think a lot of agent stuff just comes down to that. I mean, you still have this like one voice that's like, that's the ChatGPT voice. And, you know,
Yeah,
Right.
you can tell.
yeah, people can have stepmom, but actually have an AI that actually really like matches your, like the way you think and talk, you know, kind of like
Yeah.
your intellectual level, your knowledge base. I think that is surprisingly not really there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. It's going to be an interesting year coming up, I think, where
Yeah.
it's hopefully a little bit of a maturation of the space, maybe.
Yeah.
And we've had this fun, quick, high growth, high usage increase, and now it's like, okay, now what? What are we going to do now? It'll be interesting.
I mean, look, in the long run, that right. I mean, if you think about it in terms of, like disruption stuff, right? At some point, the AI gets good enough where, yeah, you can use it kind of unlimited. Like you can have your own model, you know.
Hmm.
It's not going to be the best model. So when there's a personalized model, that's really just for you. Like OpenAI, they kind of dangle that promise to you, but they don't really give it to you. It's like, oh, it has your context.
Yeah.
You know? But it's not really a model that knows how to talk to you. You know, it's not really a model that learns your inherent preferences, right? It's not really a model that can tell you the news that you want to know in the morning or right now. And I think I think that's going to happen. I don't know who's going to
Yeah.
build it. Probably OpenAI at this point, you know. Why not? Gary.
Well, this is going to be interesting. Thank you for coming on. You have a very unique perspective because your product, I feel like, has such a holistic view of things. And so I think that accompanies you, which is always fascinating to talk to you about. So thank you for bringing that to the show. If people want to follow you, follow DeepNewz, what are the best channels to do that to see this next year play out?
Yeah, just I mean, follow me, I guess, on X. I should probably blog more. I have a Substack, but I haven't posted in a while. But I think
Okay.
some of these ideas might be worth writing down. And I've been
Yeah,
sitting on them
Yeah.
and taking notes.
Definitely.
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, and I'm curious what other people think. Yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting year. I think a lot of consolidation, a lot of things closing down. I mean, I'll tell you the real question I want to know is, you know, what the heck are SSI and the thinking machines people doing? I mean,
Yeah.
That's true. I
Yeah.
hadn't thought about them in a while.
yeah, right?
Totally forgot they were hanging out there. It feels like a TV show where they have, you know, a villain that they're keeping on the back burner for the third
I
season.
mean, they're definitely doing stuff for sure. But look, I mean, I think also, I guess the other thing I should have said is just sort of beyond coding. I think that basically everybody who comes in and says, hey, they do this amazing stuff and they like leverage themselves with AI, they're basically using AI to do one of three things. It's either to write code, which is great, but sort of like a certain kind of code, let's just say, but it's still very useful. Very, very useful. Vibe coding is great.
For sure.
For certain things. So you have write code, do some sort of research, right? Or like automate some sort of like sales funnel, right?
Yeah.
And that's great. That's a lot more than, hey, people just use ChatGPT to cheat on their homework, you know?
Yeah. Much better.
Much better. But yeah, I think something, again, this is just like kind of like boring, but like an AI that actually like really feels like it knows you, you know? I don't want to get into the her stuff. It's fine. It turned out to be a better analogy than I thought. But, like in terms of your recruiting or dating app or
Yeah.
anything like that, just putting the ones that are out there, is it's like something that really truly understands like what you're actually kind of like looking for and what interests you. Not even in like a brilliant way, not like your friend that's super smart, but like your friend that understands how people work a little bit.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
Yeah, that would be powerful for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is in the consumer space. And in the business case, it's going to be, hey, you have this AI that helps you write a sales report and cleans up these articles and takes this contracts and changes from A to B. Where it's like, hey, you want to move your incorporation from Delaware to, whatever, Texas, and rewrite all the contract. I don't know, like that kind of stuff is great, but I guess it just doesn't interest me that much.
Yeah,
it's very practical, but maybe not as exciting. So.
Yeah, but the
It'll be
practical
interesting
things
to
are
see how-
exciting. The job one is exciting, right?
If it does that for you, it's very exciting.
The job and the dating stuff is very interesting. So those are things I have touched and worked on a little bit just to talk to people. But like, yeah, I mean, and people think about the intake and things like this, but just what are the pieces you need to actually give you that magical kind of understanding that people want,
Awesome. Interesting. Okay. Well, we will definitely stay in touch. We're excited to see what plays out the next year, and I'll keep using DeepNewz. I use it regularly, so please keep it going.
Thanks. Yeah,
Thank you
great.
so much for coming on.